Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Think Business. Looking forward to talking with Marcus Räder. Marcus, always enjoy talking to people who have been in tech startups around the world over the last many years. And you are coming today as the CEO and as the founder of your newest company, Hostaway, which is a very cool concept about the leading all-in-one vacation rental software and Airbnb management system. You know, there's a lot of talk, and I'd love to jump into get the conversation started where, you know, a lot of people are talking about passive income. They have been, and I think the pandemic has really driven the conversation of passive income. And a lot of people are looking at Airbnbs, right, as a passive form of income. And then the question is always, you know, kind of falls into the operations of it. Well, how do I actually manage it? And so I was excited to see you on the show today. Talk a little bit about just kind of what you're seeing in that world, and then how your system can help people actually probably, you know, push that along even further.
Thank you very much for having me, John. And it's an interesting opener. I think if there's any customers of Hostaway listening right now, they're probably laughing about the idea of passive income, because a lot of our clients, they're actually doing the work needed to make the income passive, and they're working it 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
because that's what it takes to make it passive. But it's not passive for them; it's passive for the owner of the property.
Yeah.
So we sell software. We call it an all-in-one solution, but it's really an ERP combined with a CRM, a communication platform, marketing tool, payments processor, accounting, staff management, all in one, for vacation rentals. And the reason why it has to be a separate software, where you can't run it on a platform like Salesforce combined with Oracle, is that everything in the world of vacation rentals always change. So someone makes a booking for next week, turns out they want to stay 2 days longer. And what you'll also find out is that the fridge is broken, so you need that fixed, or you have to put the guest somewhere else. And then all of a sudden a hurricane comes and 10 of your properties, well, they're underwater, so you can't host those guests. This is why standard platforms can't really manage this type of business that's fast moving.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people who want to have a vacation rental as passive income, it can be truly passive as long as you hire someone else to manage it for you, because it can't you can't really wait. If you have a long-term rental and the fridge is broken, and the tenant reaches out and you say, yeah, why don't you go and order a new fridge, or you order a new fridge and they'll be fine. But if you got someone who's been saving for a year for their one vacation, and they're coming there, they're going to stay a long weekend, and on the second day the fridge breaks, you just can't have that. That's
Yeah.
unacceptable.
Yeah.
And this is why it's definitely not passive. You need to be on call 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
even with just one property.
Yeah. Yeah. And like any business, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Let's talk a little bit about just kind of how you came up with the idea. You know, you've been in the tech industry for some time now, in tech startups. I always love talking to guests about where the idea originated from. You know, how you looked at the landscape and saw competition, and then elevated the idea to the next level.
Very good question. So originally, back in 2015, I made a bold move. I decided to immigrate to Canada, and I had before that about 10 years of tech startup experience in some very successful companies and also in some very unsuccessful companies. And as I started looking for positions, I quickly realized, no, this is my time to make my one successful company, and that's exactly what I did. At the time, I was very fascinated by the sharing economy, as it was called back then, and
Hmm.
it's really been an interesting 7 years, because pretty much everything we knew back then has changed in this space, especially with COVID, which accelerated a lot of changes that were already going on, and consumer trends as well. But back then, the sharing economy was a big thing. Companies like Uber, Even Uber Eats and Airbnb were hot names, and I thought, why don't I rent out my place in Amsterdam? And I started looking into turning it into a passive revenue stream. And I quickly found out that Airbnb can't do that for me, because what I need is someone to be there in case of emergencies. Airbnb won't do that. What I need is someone to clean the place. Airbnb is not going to do that. I need someone to take photos. Airbnb is not going to do that. And I need someone who's in the right time zone to answer questions. What's a good restaurant? Well, I can't answer that if it's 3 a.m. in the morning, because that's when I'm sleeping. But once again, Airbnb won't do that. And that's when I started thinking, there's got to be an app for that. There's got to be an app. And turns out there wasn't an app.
Yeah.
But turns out what I was looking for was a piece of software, when actually what I needed was a property manager. And so I started looking into the space because it was really fascinating, and I started interviewing property managers. And turns out that the image that I had of Airbnb at the time, and the image that you could see in the TV ads, is that you can make extra money on the side, rent out a spare bedroom, put your kids through college, or fund your vacation or your surgery, depending on your lifestyle. Um, but actually, Airbnb at the time in 2015, most of the money was coming from so-called professional hosts. They either owned, or most of them actually managed, other people's properties, either as subleases and or as a revenue share model, and they were just renting out, usually condos in big cities. There were any big city, you'll find tens or even hundreds of thousands of these. And that was really shocking to me, how professional this industry was, an industry that didn't really exist just a few years earlier. Before that, it was all beaches and mountains, and you could rent a house by the lake, but you couldn't go into a big city and rent a penthouse condo. That was unheard of. And I started interviewing them. As a teenager, I did a lot of market research as a job, and so it's very easy for me to just call up people and come up with a convincing reason why they should spend their afternoon answering my questions. And I interviewed about 40 of them, and it turns out all of them were hindered by the lack of technology.
Yeah.
And that was really the moment when I realized, well, I need to build this technology, because if I didn't realize that this industry even exists and it's so professional, that means there's a lot of other people out there who don't realize it just yet.
Yeah.
And when I started pitching the idea to investors, I found out the hard way that I was correct. Nobody understood how big this is. I think there was one investor who really broke me down after a 1 hour discussion, where he said, I stayed in an Airbnb once. I didn't like it. I don't believe in the model. But I think it was truly with the pandemic, when a travel company was one of the few companies that was able to do a massively successful 100 billion IPO. That's
Yeah.
when finally the world accepted that
Hey,
Airbnb is here to stay.
yeah. You know, and it's a good example of sometimes an idea can be a great idea, just not at that moment in time. And
Exactly.
sometimes the world and the market needs to actually catch up to the idea. One of the things as a business coach, I'm always telling clients, create an idea journal, and where you're every day you're putting ideas in it, because and then try things out. Sometimes you may launch a product or a service, and it just doesn't take, but it just maybe isn't the right time, and you got to go back to the drawing board and wait for the right time a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about, you made a comment, I'm going to build this. Well, I think the first step to a lot of things is commitment, right? Commitment to do the research, commitment to make sure there's actually a product out there or isn't out there that you can then build. But then, the courage to actually do something with it and build a company. In a sentence or two, can you tell the Think community, how did you tap into your courage to actually take it and then, move it into a business that you could grow and scale and build?
I think I speak and I mentor a lot of startups, and also I speak to future founders, people who have an idea and want to turn it into a business. And the one thing that I see is that they're very comfortable. In fact, they're too comfortable to make the jump into the unknown, and that seems to be delaying their decision by years. And most people never end up doing it. I was a newly landed immigrant in a new country I had never been to, Canada, and I was surrounded by a lot of wealth and also by a lot of misfortune, and I quickly realized that this is what I have to do. This is the only way I need to survive. So my drive there was not so much as replacing something comfortable with a potential lottery ticket, but rather it was desperation. I had to make it or I had to go back home. There was no other choice.
Yeah. All right. Good. I like it. I like it. Um, Talk about, before we move into a quick speed round, your ideal client. I mean, you've kind of mentioned them kind of throughout, but just to be a little bit more specific, who is the ideal client for the software Hostaway?
The ideal client is someone who is managing multiple properties and is planning to grow in the future. So it's someone who is either thinking about turning it into a full-time job or already doing it full-time. They might have 2 properties today or 200, but they're planning to scale to hundreds or to even thousands of properties. Our biggest customer has 8,000 properties, and that's when you need to take a deep look at your business and see, okay, what am I doing today when I have 2, and what do I need to do? Which changes do I need to make to turn it into 100 and then into 500 and then into 1,000? Those type of people, they're in the right place with Hostaway.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I love it. All right. Quick speed round. A book that's had the biggest impact on you.
It's a book that I wish I read when my wife told me to read it before I started Hostaway. She told me, okay, there's only one book you need to read. And I said, yeah, maybe later. When I actually read it about 4 years later, as we were on the brink of bankruptcy, like we were in the first 5 years, like every startup always
Yeah.
is, I was actually crying with relief. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Such a good
Uh,
book.
and it was just I suddenly felt like I'm not alone. I'm not the only one going through this until then I heard other people, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, this book moved me.
Well, good. Well, it's like sometimes things come in our way at exactly the right time. Yeah. So that's great. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
Best piece of wisdom ever received.
Yeah.
um I can't on I received so much. Actually, yes, I will do the honors to my former boss, who said, if you're a VC backed startup, the best thing you can do is to become cash flow positive and tell your investors to go to hell. And I think and that's exactly
Yeah.
what we
Yeah.
did, and I think
That-
that's the best piece of advice
Yeah.
I've ever received.
That's
And
great.
that's very different from what everyone else says.
Yeah.
Everyone else always said, if you're VC backed, you need to grow, and then when you grow, you raise the next round and you're going to
Yeah.
become a unicorn. No, do the exact opposite. That's what we
Take
did.
control. Yeah. Take control back. Finish your sentence, Marcus. One thing every entrepreneur should focus on a little bit more in 2023 is,
Money.
yeah.
You need to have the money.
Right. You need money to keep the doors open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Marcus, this has been great. I always love talking to people in the tech industry. I always love talking to people who have an idea and have built a great company and have, walked the journey of difficulty. Because, you read The Hard Things About Hard Things, which is a great book by Ben Horowitz, but you gotta be in the trenches and live it, and that's the best way to learn. So think community. I'm a business coach. I work with successful people who are stuck. I get them unstuck in all avenues of business. And I love this podcast because we have guests like Marcus on who can give guidance to get you unstuck. So whether it is the book he mentioned, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, that he had been putting off for 4 years, really kind of figure out what you've been putting off and resisting. There's a great book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art, and it talks about resistance and that we resist what we need to do most. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, it can be lonely. And so sometimes we need to actually reach out and, collab with someone to make sure we can kind of get things done. And sometimes that collab is just reading a book. right? Where you feel like you have a business partner that's kind of speaking to you in a way. So whatever you've been resisting to today, Marcus, this has been great. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me and everybody else today. Your website can be found at hostaway.com, and my website, everybody, can be found at jondwoskin.com. Marcus, any last thoughts?
No, thank you very much for having me here. And if anyone ever want to find me or reach out to me, just Google for Marcus Hostaway LinkedIn. First result is going to be me.
All right, great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you.